Welcome back guys, we are now going to start a new story Pokémon Plus My Hero Academia by Thatchickendude. You can find his profile link in the description. Pokémon Trainer Hero Chapter 1, Visitor from a Different World. Today, of all days, Izuku Midoriya was feeling a plethora of different emotions all at once: excitement, joy, stress, fear, and anxiety. Now, you may be wondering why he is feeling this way. Well, today is the day that he and the rest of his class are able to use their quirks in an all-out mock villain versus mock hero exercise, so he was excited. He also got paired up with a very pretty girl called Okako Uraraka, so he was happy. It was also the first time he would be using his quirk, which he knew from the get-go was extremely unstable and possibly damaging or fatal to his body, so he was stressed. He and Uraraka paired up against two people with extremely powerful and versatile quirks that each had much skill in using, so he was anxious. However, one of those opponents just so happened to be his ex-childhood friend and bully, Bakugou Katsuki. And judging by the look on his face, he was out for BLD, so yeah, he was shitting his breathes. Izuku tried to cool his nerves as he and Uraraka crept around the building where the fake weapon was being guarded. He even attempted to make a plan with Uraraka to secure victory. Ultimately, it came down to Izuku distracting Bakugou, knowing he would come after him, while Uraraka snuck around and tried to capture the weapon from Ida. Things happened just as planned. Bakugou charged in head first through the whole building while hunting for Izuku like a savage. Izuku faced Katsuki head-on while Uraraka made her way up the building. The two teens were in a standoff, with Izuku visibly injured from several of Katsuki's explosions. They were about to attack one another when something strange stopped them in their tracks. An unusual portal appeared out from the ceiling, and its presence alone was enough to stop the superpowered teens from their scuffle. The portal generated a strange aura while emitting an otherworldly sound. It was a luminescent grey with a white spider web-like design that never appeared, ending to SCK itself in. After staring at the strange portal for a solid minute, it began to fluctuate, and screams could be heard coming from within. Several seconds passed as the screaming only got louder, and a shape could be seen forming closer to the portal's opening. Another moment passed, and a screaming object hurled through the portal and crashed among the rubble around the building. Stones were flung all over the place, and a huge dust cloud exploded far enough to make the two teens cover their eyes. Meanwhile, the portal behind them immediately closed after spitting out its passenger. After a few moments of letting the dust clear to see what had burst through into their mock exams, a small groan could be heard from the dust and rubble. On her. My head, came a voice clearly in pain. Another second later, a silhouette broke the dust cloud, and stones were unearthed around it. After a few minutes of watching the silhouette stubble and pick itself up from the ground, it finally came into the open to reveal a person, a regular human person. "What hit me?" the person asked while holding their head. The person rubbed their head and back while saying, "That's the last time I let how convince me to have a malasad eating contest with Nebi." Once the person walked closer to the awestruck teens, they could now make their own description. It was a tall, slender, yet medium-built guy with tan skin. He looked a bit older than Izuku and Katsuki, with medium-length yet thick purple hair on top and black hair coming at his back and sides, yellow eyes, and a weird fashion sense. He wore a white and purple headband with black trim and a weird symbol on it that looked like two half-circle lines covering a circle. The headband also separated his purple and black hair, making it look like a weird hat. He wore a white muscle shirt and an open purple hoodie with weird red eye marks on the hood. Black and purple shorts with white and purple shoes. Around his waist was a belt made of a conglomerate of different-sized bags, some of which had evil little faces with the mouth being the zipper. After shaking himself off from the dust and getting back his calibrations, the older teen finally noticed the other younger teen standing in front of him in dumbstruck silence. He looked around at his surroundings and back at the teens a few times to make sure he wasn't imagining this. After a minute, he side-mouthed to the air and said, "I don't think we're in Alola anymore, Nebi." After a moment of no response from the air, the teen looked to his side and said, "Nebi." That's when a look of panic exploded across his face, and he began to shout out loud, "Nebi! Nebi! Where are you?" As the teen shouted around for this Nebi person, the other two teens finally emerged from their shock and started to understand what had happened, and so did their personalities. Bakugou was the first to snap out of his trance and shouted, "Hey! Purple FO!" The teen turned to Bakugou, looked around, and pointed to himself confusedly. "Yes, you, I'm talking to you. Who the hell else is wearing purple? Don't look down on me." Izuku did want to point out that the size difference between the two was extremely great. In fact, the older teen towered over Bakugou by at least 5 inches, but decided to keep quiet, knowing full well what he'd do. The guy put his hands up defensively and exclaimed, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's just calm down for a second there." He took a deep breath. He stated, "Okay, look, I don't know who you guys are or where I even am right now, but I can clearly speak for both parties when I say that we are all clearly freaked out over what just happened. So why don't we just take a deep breath, calm down, and try to figure this out without going crazy?" I second that thought. Izuku finally became vocal. "Kaken, we don't know what's going on right now or who this guy is, but let's be reasonable, end the fight here, and try to figure this out. He's at least trying to be civil dash." "Are you saying I'm not civilized?" Bakugou snapped at Izuku while letting out small explosions. Izuku freaked out while backing away and exclaimed nervously, "No. You just always rush into things and don't dash." "Shut the hell up, shitty nerd," he snapped at Izuku again. Meanwhile, the older teen was back far away from the two teens, nearly in a corner, in a weird defensive and shocked animated stance, with an expression like he just said some form of high sacrilege. The other two teens noticed this and turned their attention to him. He stood there for a good minute before finally speaking in a fearful tone. You have moved, like a Pokémon. That's impossible, you're human." Unless, he trailed off with a horrified expression. Did Team Plasma, Team Rocket, and the Ether Foundation join forces to make a human Pokémon cross? What is this world coming to? Does their insanity know no bounds? He began to rant. Izuku was more than confused at this point about whatever he was talking about. Who was Team Rock, Plasma, and the Ether Foundation? What's a Pokémon? Who's Nebi? What are moves? Bakugou, however, was not at all confused or asking any similar questions. Instead, he was even more sessed off after getting more crazy info and being ignored. A vein bulges in his head as his anger rises to new levels. First, his fight with Deku was interrupted by this purple dude who comes out of a magic wormhole, his thrown completely off his mojo, and now the purple FA and stupid Deku are trying to stop the fight, his fight, and the purple FA was only spewing out more noise while calling him a poke whatever. Screw this. I wanted to blast SHT up, so I'm gonna do it. Bakugou thought to himself while using his explosions to rocket towards him. F this. I'll blast you to hell first and ask questions later, he yelled with a vicious look in his eyes. Kaken, stop, Izuku cried as he tried to hold Bakugou. AH. Mercy, the teen cried while covering his body in defense. Bakugou was only a few feet away from the older teen and ready to blow him up with a powerful blast. His smile curved into a wicked grin, his body flared with excitement, and his arms trembled with the rush of power rising to his fingertips. Just before he could ignite his quirk to the older teen's face, a small round object bounced from his belt and in front of the attack. Bakugou flinched for a moment at seeing the circular object until it exploded in a flash of bright blue light. Bakugou winced at the blinding burning sensation in his eyes and then felt something collide with his body with such great force that it flung him clear across the room and crashed into the opposite far wall. Izuku also winced from the bright light, heard, and saw Bakugou's body fly across the room and slam into a wall. When his eyes readjusted, he saw the most amazingly terrifying thing he'd ever seen. The older teen waited for his face to get caved in by Bakugou, but when nothing happened but the sound of something slamming into a wall with great force, he dared to look out from his arm shield. He saw that the flying teen was gone, and a set of red scales wrapped around his body. He heard a great triumph roar and followed the sound up to a creature that he smiled with relief and joy at. Gyarados, he squealed with joy at the huge creature. Gyarados! Is that what he called this thing? Izuku squeaked with fear in his head. The creature standing in front of them and defending the older teen was nothing he'd seen before. Well, actually, he had once before. When he was younger, his mother would tell him scary stories about powerful serpentine-like dragons with untold power, and this thing matched their descriptions perfectly. It was like something that came straight out of science fiction. A huge serpentine-like monster with armored red scales and a yellow underbelly, angry red eyes, a huge mouth filled with fangs, 2 long whiskers, and ear fins with a 3-point crest on its head. 3 pointed fins on its back, 2 near where its head met its neck, and the last near the end of its long body where it had a tail fin like a fish. Izuku couldn't tell if its crest made it look mad or it was just always looking mad, but this Gyarados thing sure did not look pleased. And seeing it made Izuku keep his eyes trained on it, frozen in place as he swallowed dryly. The older teen was not scared of the giant dragon fish, instead, he looked overjoyed. "Boy, am I glad to see you, buddy," he exclaimed excitedly to the animal. Gyarados leaned down, letting out a low yet friendly-sounding grumble. It brought its face close to the older teen, who petted it under its chin. "You saved me in the nick of time again," the older teen said, embarrassed. Gyarados made a sound in its throat that could have been equal to laughter, as if teasing him. At this time, Bakugou pulled himself from the wall and fell to the floor with a splat. He picked himself up on shaky legs and heavy breath and stared down the older teen, only to be thrown off guard by the giant red sea serpent cooler around him. "The F is that?" he shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. All heads turned to Bakugou as Gyarados turned back to the teen and defensively coiled around the older teen as it let out a powerful and bone-chilling roar in warning. Bakugou let out a small growl and stared down the giant animal, only making it even angrier. Izuku knew Bakugou was not seeking reason at this point. He knew he'd try to attack despite the danger plainly involved. So he could hide behind a pillar and wait things out or intervene if things got too out of hand. The older teen, who looked much more confident, stated to Bakugou, "Listen here, you hybrid or whatever you are. I don't know who or what you are, but you had better stop attacking if you know what's good for you. You can't win." Bakugou snarled at this declaration and set off more explosions in his hands. "Shut the hell up. Don't you tell me what to do, you purple F. I'll kill that shitty fish, and then you," Bakugou shouted at him. Gyarados roared again, and the older teen replied calmly, "Then you leave me no choice." He took out a small round device from his belt and pointed it at Bakugou. It was spherical and half red and half white. A black line separated the colors, and a white button was in the center. "I'll just have to battle and then catch you to quell that vicious temper of yours," he said boldly. "Don't you make fun of me, Bakugou roared as he shot towards the teen. The older teen struck a confident pose, shooting his hand out in front, and exclaimed to his beast, "You ready, Gyarados?" Gyarados roared in acknowledgement. "Great, then let's size him up with a dragon pulse," he shouted. Gyarados then closed its mouth, and when it opened back up, it shot out a multicolored beam that took a dragon-like shape and soared toward Bakugou. Bakugou used his explosions to curve around the beam and continued closing the distance between them. "You're fast, but I have the type advantage." Gyarados, use hydro pump, he commanded the fish dragon. Gyarados then shot out a power stream of water from its mouth like a cannon. The blast was much wider and faster than Dragon Pulse, and Bakugou had to halt his attack and dodge the blast by blasting himself in the opposite direction. "Let's see how you fare with a rapid-fire attack." "Gyarados keeps using the hydro pump," he shouted at the animal. Gyarados obeyed and continued shooting multitudes of hydro pumps at Bakugou. Bakugou could barely keep out of range and outpace each attack, each of which packed massive speed and power behind them. So much so that the ground broke apart, pillars were cut in half, and gaping holes were made all over, reducing concrete to mud and stones. Izuku was stunned by this sight. Not only was this thing unnatural, but it also had multiple quirks. First, it was an energy attack, and now it was a water attack. What was this thing? He was also having a hard time keeping out of the firing line or just finding decent cover. Every time he would hide, a blast of water or some other attack would destroy his defense, and he would have to flee for his life to not get ripped apart. Eventually, Gyarados got tired from spitting up water and had to take a breather. Bakugou saw his chances and rocketed towards the monster in mere seconds. He closed the distance and let off a few powerful explosions right into the fish's face. Gyarados roared in pain from the attack and inches back from the blast. "Gyarados, are you okay?" the older teen called the fish. Gyarados shook itself off and roared again. The older teen smiled and said, "Good to hear." When Bakugou set off his last explosions on Gyarados' face, he used the momentum to push himself into the air. He then propelled himself down with another, ready to pepper the giant fish again. "Here he comes," the older teen called attention to Bakugou. "Use thunder." Gyarados' head crest began to produce electricity and shot a bolt into the air. It curved back down and right into Bakugou's flight path. Bakugou got lucky and managed to use another explosion to propel himself back. The attack missed and made the ground underneath explode. "Hyper beam!" cried the older teen as Gyarados shot out a yellowish-white beam of energy from its mouth. This time, the attack hit Bakugou and sent him flying back. He skidded across the floor after the beam dissipated and quickly brought himself back to his feet with a feral snarl. Gyarados hissed back and kept its defensive stance around its MSTR. "Geez, this thing is tough. How much HP does it have?" the older teen asked himself. Bakugou then raised up one of his gauntlets and pointed it at the teen and his pet. "What's it doing?" the teen asked himself. Bakugou snickered and stated, "This time, I'll blow both of you to hell." "Oh," the teen pales in fear. "Now die," Bakugou yells as he pulls the pin and shoots off a deadly explosion. The older teen screamed in fear, seeing as there was nowhere to escape from the blast. But Gyarados had another idea and quickly wrapped its long body around its MSTR to shield him from the attack. The blast quickly engulfed Gyarados' body in a plum of fire and debris within a blink. The dust cleared, and Gyarados' charred red body emerged from the smoke. The giant fish unraveled from around its MSTR and flopped on the ground with a defeated groan. The older teen opened his eyes and saw that he was completely fine, along with the downed Gyarados. He freaked out, running to the fish's head and holding it. He begged, "No, no, no. Come on, buddy, you have to get up. Please. That Pokémon is still on the loose and WHA." Bakugou emerged from the smoke and collapsing building with a snide smile on his face. He stared down the older teen with one visible yes, which caused him to scream with terror. This sight made Bakugou lick his lips in anticipation as he slowly walked up to the teen and his downed animal. "Arceus, Arceus, 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 Arceus," the teen cursed as he began to shuffle wildly through his belt pouches. Bakugou then went into a full sprint, ready to blast the teen, and the teen began to panic while failing to back away due to Gyarados' body trapping him in. He looked back at the fallen form of his pet, then back to Bakugou, who was still charging him with only a few feet to close the gap. He jumped in front of the fish's face with arms wide open to shield the fish from the explosion, closed his eyes, and braced himself. "Die," Bakugou shouted as he jumped into the air with a large explosion. However, instead of being hit with an explosion straight to the face, Bakugou was hit with a fin tail straight to the side of his body, sending him flying into the nearest wall. The teen opened his eyes and saw Bakugou jammed into the wall with an angry glare on his face, Gyarados' tail lying out in front of him, and Gyarados starting to pick himself back up. Gyarados lifted its body up and let out a triumphant war cry. The older teen's eyes glittered with hope and joy at seeing the giant fish while exclaiming, "Gyarados, you're okay. I knew you could tough it out. You're not one of my best for nothing." Gyarados lifted its head down to its MSTR and allowed the older teen to pet the fish under its chin and behind its finned ears with a growling purr. Meanwhile, Bakugou had pulled himself away from the wall and was looking even more sessed off than before. He lost off a few explosions and an angry scream, showing that he hadn't given up yet. The older teen and Gyarados look back towards the angry, fuming younger teen and tense up, seeing as he is still not down. Even after all that, it's still kicking. What level is this thing anyway? The older teen complained. The two people and giant animals stare down at each other for several tenths of seconds as the older teen whispers to his pet, Gyarados, I have an idea, but I need you to trust me. Gyarados seemed to understand its MSTR and appeared to nod its head. The teen smiled and pointed his arm at Bakugou. He commanded, then get ready to battle. Gyarados roared with gusto. Bakugou charged at the teen and his pet as the older teen commanded the fish to tank the attack. Gyarados obeyed and stood perfectly still, allowing Bakugou to charge forward and land a few powerful attacks on the fish's face. Thick black smoke covered the giant animal's face as a painful screech was heard from inside the cloud. Bakugou smiled at hearing the roar, knowing he had done a significant amount of damage to the creature. The older teen grinned, seeing Bakugou's ego flare up as he had planned. He took advantage and shot his arm out towards him, commanding, now, Gyarados, use Hydro Pump one last time. Suddenly, a large stream of water bursts out from the clouds and nails Bakugou head-on. Bakugou was thrown back for several feet before he was able to push himself out of the torrent's power and landed on his feet soaking wet. Bakugou growled at this, and putting up his other gauntlet, he aimed to fire it one last time at the creature. But the older team expected this and waited until Bakugou pulled the pin. Quickly, Gyarados, get rid of that explosion with Hyper Beam, the only team commanded the dragonfish. Gyarados then let out the pale yellowish energy beam and shot it into the center of the explosion. The two forces collide with such great force that they cancel each other out in an explosion of smoke. Bakugou covered his eyes and tried to gain better footing from the force of the explosions exerted from both sides. But he was quickly outmaneuvered when Gyarados burst through the smoke with an angry expression and pounced on Bakugou. Gyarados then quickly wrapped its body around Bakugou like a snake and held him in a restraining squeeze. Bakugou tried to break free, but to no avail, as he simply flopped his head around like a fish out of water. So, instead, he changed to swearing and threats. Let me the hell go, you ugly seafood platter. I'll turn you into sashimi and blast that purple FO into next week, he cursed them both. The older teen smiled and said, then let's finish this. Gyarados, finish it off with thunder. Gyarados' head crest generated electricity and shot a bolt in the air, which rolled down where Bakugou was held in its coils. Bakugou looked up with a stunned expression and marveled at the lighting in fear. The attack shot down and landed directly on Bakugou, whose screams were drowned out by the intense power. Gyarados let go of Bakugou's, letting his body slump into the ground, and moved away as the older teen threw the round half-colored device at Bakugou. The device flew through the air and bounced right off Bakugou's head. It then popped open, and a red beam enveloped the younger teen's body. It seemed to be similar to electricity as well, since it began to shock and cause Bakugou to convulse even further. The device fell to the ground and broke into pieces. The older teen looked at this in confusion and said, what? It didn't work. But it's a Pokémon, he should have been caught. Unless since it's part human, it can't be caught. He then looked out into the distance like his brain was buffering until he snapped back exclaiming while throwing his arms in front, then how the hell were Ether, Rocket, and Plasma going to control that thing if they couldn't catch it? Then, the older teen's eyes caught someone hiding behind one of the few remaining pillars, a set of fearful green eyes. The teen turned towards the eyes as Gyarados stood at the ready, half cooler around its MSTR. But the older teen put a hand up, signaling the fish to stand down, and it did. Seeing that he wasn't going to attack, Izuku poked his head out a little more. The older teen took up an awkward and coy demeanor while looking to the ground in a sweat drop. Seeing this, Izuku decided to just come out from his hiding spot but still kept his eyes on the giant red dragonfish. The older teen rubbed his head while laughing nervously and apologized, he. Sorry you had to see me get like that. I get pretty intense when I battle, especially with new or hard ones. I hope I didn't scare you too much. Izuku also gave a nervous laugh and replied, he. Yeah. I guess we should talk now. To clear the air on things, the older teen asked. Why yeah, talk. That's what I wanted to do, Emma. Izuku trailed off, not knowing the teenager's name. The older teen blushed in embarrassment and quickly introduced himself, Garfield. But everyone always calls me Gar, or Gaga, or Jengar. You can call me whatever. Izuku Midoriya. Nice meeting you, Izuku introduced himself with a slight bow. An awkward silence filled the area as the two teens couldn't figure out how to continue their conversation. So nice, giant, fish, dragon, thing, Izuku tried to break the ice. The older teen pepped up a bit and replied, oh, thanks. He's a Gyarados and one of my oldest companions. He's helped me through a lot of battles, I owe much of my success to him. He said this while petting Gyarados' scales. The teen then turned to Bakugou's still body and motioned to him. He asked, Suiyu, what's up with this Pokémon? Where'd he come from? Izuku looked at him weirdly as he replied, Kaken isn't a Pokémon. And what's a Pokémon? The older teen looked back at him weirdly and stated, you're kidding, right? You have to be kidding. This dash, he exclaimed while waving at Bakugou. Can't be anything but a Pokémon. He was flying around and shooting F-fire from high his hands. And he took a direct blast from Hyper Beam. I've been hit by Hyper Beam, and let me tell why it's not fun. Also, how could you ask what's a Pokémon when there's literally one right next to me? Izuku blinked at the teen and replied, that's Kaken's quirk. He can produce explosions from his hands, and also, he is definitely human. What's a quirk? Gar asked back. I think we should really start explaining some things to one another, Izuku offered. Yeah, I think so too, Gar agreed with a sigh. A few hours later in a meeting hall. Gar now sat around a table surrounded by several heroes, all of whom were asking and answering each other's questions about what was going on in the world. The mock exercise was cancelled, and all students were sent back to their homerooms until things were sorted out, apart from Bakugou, who was sent to Recovery Girl for his extreme injuries. After some time of debate and questions, the group finally settled down and tried to compile everything they learned about each other in the simplest form. So let me try and see if I understand this clearly. There are no Pokémon in this world, and all Pokémon are called animals, and they don't have any moves, but instead, the humans are the Pokémon and have moves you call quirks, and work as superheroes like in comic books. That is crazy, Gar exclaimed while sitting back in his seat with a flop. Yes, and let me see if I understand this clearly. In your world, your animals are called Pokémon. These Pokémon have quirks, and all of them have multiple or interchangeable quirks, but people don't. Do you use Pokémon for fighting while keeping them in these Pokeball things? That's even crazier, Aizawa explained back nonchalantly. Gar immediately sat up straight and exclaimed, you're telling me? I've been to some strange alternate dimensions before, but this place beats them all. So you've done this sort of thing before? Midnight asked. Gar nodded and replied, oh yeah, loads of times. But like I said, I've never seen a place like this. Something must have happened during the trip, he speculated while tapping his chin. How exactly did you get here? You say you're quirkless, yet you're able to travel between dimensions, Present Mic asked. Well, technically, I'm not the one who does the traveling, Nebi does, Gar confirmed. Who's Nebi? All Might inquired. He's a legendary ultra beast that can evolve. He was kept hostage by a crazed woman who was obsessed with gaining knowledge of other ultra beasts. I went to another dimension with the crazed woman's daughter after Nebi evolved, and fought her as she merged with another ultra beast and beat her in a battle in the ultra beast's home dimension, Gar explained to the heroes. All the heroes sitting around the table stare and blink multiple times at the young man with confused expressions, trying to make sense of what he just said, as if he had just grown a third head. Realizing his explanation, he blushed embarrassedly. Rubbing his head, he said, I realize now that there is a lot to unpack in that. But for the sake of simplicity, let's just say he's a really powerful Pokémon that travels between dimensions. Wow, Present Mic whistles. Wow indeed, Gar confirmed. So, did you come here on purpose when you and Nebia were traveling? Midnight asked. Gar took a sharp breath, and, putting up both hands under his chin, he explained, well, actually that's a story all on its own. You see, I was in Glara, and after I had held my title as champion for the umpteenth time, I set out to do other things, fill the pokes, complete my curry decks, catch every Pokémon in Gala, EV, and 4 breeding, and get all forms and flavors of alchemy. But then I got bored again and decided to go traveling to visit some old friends. First, I traveled to Alola and met my old friend Howedash. Gar was then cut off by Aizawa, who butted in, saying, could you just skip to the part where you got to our world? Gar's sweat dropped in embarrassment. Oh right, sorry. Anyway, Hao said that he could out-eat any man or Pokemon in a Malasad eating contest, and he was right. So he decided to test his skills against something that wasn't a man or Pokemon and wanted to compete against Nebi. Who is, but actually isn't a Pokemon. It's kind of weird, anyway. I don't know how he convinced me, but I agreed, and then the two started to eat while I was sitting on Nebi's back to keep him calm in case things went south. And well, things did go south, and real quick, too. I shouldn't have let Nebi eat bitter Malasada cores, then he started to go wild from the taste. He started to open ultra wormhole portals all over the place randomly and jumped into one, going at a speed I'd never seen him go before. He booted me off, and I got scared outside the ultra stream and into a weird wormhole I've never seen before. And now I'm here, he explained nonchalantly. All the heroes were silent as they digested this information and tried to make some sense of it. Most of it was really a lot of things they had never heard of before. That and the fact that it sounded so absurd. Suddenly, the door opened, and a new voice chimed into the silence, saying, well, that does sound like quite the adventure and conundrum you got yourself into, young man. All heads swiveled to the door and saw the hyper-intelligent animal thing, Principal Nezu, standing in the doorway. Finally, coming to the meeting after having to take care of some other urgent business. Nezu straightened his tie and introduced himself, saying, hello there, I am Dash. Before he could continue, Gar shot up from his seat, whipped out a Pokeball, and screamed while pointing to Nezu, a Pokémon. Gar threw the device at the small animal, and the same thing happened with Bakugou and Nezu. The device opened, and a red beam enveloped him, which caused an electric shock to run over his body and convulse from it. When it failed to catch the principal, the device fell to the ground and broke into pieces. Gar stared blankly at this before realizing what had happened and theorized, oh I guess you're not a Pokemon, huh? Nezu stood up while brushing himself off, and in the nicest, most patient tone he could manage, he confirmed, no, I'm not. Gar rubbed the back of his head, embarrassed, and apologized, saying, sorry about that. I'm a trainer, so when I see a new Pokemon, I kind of freak out and try to catch it. But I mean, you do look like a weird shiny Rattata Tux. After fixing his tie again, Nezu replied, well, not all of us are okay with being beaten to near exhaustion, forcefully placed in a small prison, and then forced to fight other creatures to the death for the entertainment of others. And let's not forget the Stockholm Syndrome. Everyone in the room looked shocked as the principal roasted the young man until the young man walked up to Nezu with a ticked-off expression and pinched his nose hard. Ouchie, Nezu complained. Gar then took a deep breath to calm himself and ranted off on the animal, saying, okay, I'm not even sure where I should begin with you. First, you have to weaken a Pokemon to catch it, it's the only way. I tried to catch a Pidgey without weakening it first, and I still regret it. Second, a Pokeball is not a prison, it's a holding device. The Pokemon's matter is converted into energy, they're more likely in a comfortable sleep-like state. Third, Pokemon battles are an international sport that has strict rules, guidelines, and regulations. Fourth, Pokemon don't fight to the death, they only fight until they pass out. And speaking of which, that's quite hypocritical coming from someone who delights in setting up events where young children fight in a ring with deadly abilities, pinning them against one another, fighting them yourselves, and sending them off to fight other stronger adults. And fifth, there is no Stockholm Syndrome. That's just a myth. When a Pokémon is caught, it immediately becomes tame enough to receive commands, and it still has free will to do what it wants when it wants. And I can't tell you how many times I literally asked a Pokémon to join me on my journey. Everyone in the room was now making shocked expressions at the sweating principal, who had just been roasted back with cold, hard facts for an adolescent. Nezu cleared his throat and replied calmly, see your point. At this point, a cold and awkward silence filled the room until Izuku, who was the only one who could care less about the current atmosphere, struck back up the conversation by asking Gar, so, it's time to ask the big question. Are you able to get back to your home dimension? Gar slumped back into his seat, and with a solemn head shake and anxious expression, he replied, I'm afraid not. Only Nebi or Lunala can travel between dimensions. He then took off 6 different-looking Pokeballs from around his belt and placed them on the table, saying, and the Pokémon I have with me can't do any of that. So I guess I'm stuck. This time, Midnight broke the atmosphere, placing a reassuring hand on Gar's shoulder and asking, is there really no way for you to contact your friends or Nebi to come pick you up? Gar looked off to the side and replied, there is one way, but it's not working. He then slumped down even further into his seat and, giving off an exhausted sigh, he continued, I could pull Nebi or Lunala from my PC, but my Pokebox is not working. Gar then pulled out a large, unusual-looking device from one of his pouches. It looked like a thick glass frisbee with a handle on top and a small metallic screen on the front with several buttons. He pressed one of the buttons, and the whole thing extended upward until it was at least 2 feet tall. It had glass all around and 3 separate grey dividers with small indents around each one where a Pokeball could be placed. It had an invisible sliding door mechanism that opened automatically. Gar sighed and said, deep ocean floors, dark caves, thick jungles, endless deserts, or the highest mountain peaks, this thing will work without fail. But I guess alternate dimensions are its limit. As another round, a silence set into the melancholy atmosphere until Present Mock asked out of the blue, wait, so you keep your pocket monsters in a PC? Yes, Gar answered. Like a computer, he asked again. Yes. Gar replied while sweat dropped a bit. A PC computer, he asked further. Yes, Gar stated firmly with an aggravated sigh, having to say the same thing over and over. That doesn't make any sense, he exclaimed in confusion. Gar rolled his eyes and explained, the Pokeballs convert matter into energy. Who's to say that matter can't also be converted to data? And besides, there are 1,000 different Pokémon. You really think I'm gonna carry around like 1,000 different Pokeballs all the time? No one said anything but opted to just stare at the young man. Seeing this, Gar sighed and continued on. The limit that anyone can carry is about 6, otherwise, they're sent to their personal PC. And the 6 that I currently have, Gar motioned to the 6 different Pokeballs on the table. Can't perform interdimensional travel. So I'm perfectly stuck, like a shelter on a slowpoke tail. Gar slumped into his seat again until Nezu spoke up, causing the young man to straighten out at his voice. Well, seeing as all things have come to light, it would be in everyone's best interest if you were to stay here at UA until you're able to travel back to your world, he told the teen. What? Everyone in the room asked the principal with mixed confusion and surprise. Well, it would be quite heartless of us to throw you out into a world simply you do not know of, and it would go against everything we at UA stand for, Nezu explained further. So you're gonna let me stay so you can keep an eye on me to make sure I don't decide to use my murderous magic beasts to slay all of you and conquer your world? Gar asked, making funny hand gestures and faces. In a way of speaking, yes, Nezu replied nonchalantly. Fair enough, Gar shrugged his shoulders in agreeance. After that was settled, Gar deviated from the topic and stated, speaking of which, sorry about nearly obliterating your students. The one with the bad temper and fire hands. Nezu waved his apology off and replied, it's quite all right, mistakes happen. And you were simply defending yourself when young Katsuki attacked you unprovoked. After he heals up, we'll be sure to talk strictly about unprofessional hero behavior. The other teachers also nodded, knowing that Bakugou would be handled accordingly. Gar then deviated from the topic again and asked, speaking of healing. What have you guys got in the line of a poke center? Ah, Poke Center, All Might asked. Gar sighed and replied in a sweat drop, I think we still have some things to discuss. Chapter 2, 1A meets Gar. The next day, everyone in 1A was abuzz with excitement as they crowded around the otherworldly person who had joined their class. It was decided that Gar would join the hero course of 1A to better hide his other-dimensional origin and Pokémon from the rest of the school and the watchful eye of the media, also because the whole class witnessed Bakugou's fight against Gar and Gyarados. So, the day following the botched mock villain and mock hero examination, Gar arrived at 1A in an official UA uniform with Aizawa, albeit with his purple and black headband. After Aizawa explained Gar's placement, he had to step out for a bit in order to take care of some last-minute things. Right after he left, the whole class sprung up from their seats and surrounded the older teen, asking him all kinds of questions or just marveling at him. Things like who he was, where he came from, what his world was like, what Pokémon are and how powerful they are, what he does, what's his favorite color, and so on and so forth. Eventually, Ida had to forcefully separate the class from the overwhelmed teen and regain some form of structure before another Pokémon burst out and decided to attack them. Most of the class listened, but a few still pressed on despite the logical demand. Until Gar broke them away, lying and saying he could already feel Gyarados' Pokeball start to shake. And seeing what the fish monster did yesterday, the rest of them didn't want to be caught up in what happened to Bakugou. After everyone spread out a bit, allowing Gar some much-needed breathing room, Ida fixed his glasses and instructed the class, now I know all of you are just as excited as I am about Garkun's placement. But let's try to have some semblance of order so as not to overwhelm him. He's in a completely new world with rules and laws he doesn't know, so let's try to help him acclimate while he's here. Sorry, Ida-kun, it's just so exciting. Why no, Uraraka apologized while rubbing the back of her head. It's not every lifetime when you get to meet a real-life alien. Kaminari exclaimed with sparkles in his eyes. I'm human. Gar commented. You know what I mean. Kaminair shot back, making Gar frown. Yeah. I mean, you were all like, wah. And wham. And boom. And your giant fish was like raw. And lasers. And water cannons. And thunder. And WOW. Mina described what happened like an excited child. Gar rubbed the back of his head, embarrassed, and replied, thanks, but his name is Gyarados. And I really didn't do that much. I just told him what to do. But I don't think someone else was very impressed about it. Gar motioned towards Bakugou sitting in the background. Bakugou was mostly completely healed, with a few patches and gauze wrappings on his body and face. He was still in his seat, slumped into it, and looking away from everyone else with an angry scowl. Oh, come on, man. There's no need to sulk. Accidents happen, Kirishima said, trying to cheer him up. Accidents. Accidents. You weren't the one blasted by a laser, doused in high-pressure water, constricted, and then blasted with lightning. Bakugou snapped back while exploding in his seat. You did attack him unprovoked. It was self-defense on his part, Gyro stated matter-of-factly. No, he's right. I did go a bit overboard. But that's mostly because I thought he was a weird Pokémon. Gar waved off Gyro while walking towards Bakugou and extending his hand. Since we'll be seeing each other more often now, let's put this behind us and start fresh. Gar offered with a smile. Baku looked down at his hand, garbed it, and in an instant flung the older teen over his shoulder and HRD on the ground. Gar gasped for air as pain shot up his back and head. The class gasped, and Ida ran forward to restrain Bakugou while Izuku and Uraraka ran to Gar to help him back up. Bakugou-san, please. I understand you're upset after getting beaten, but that's no excuse to attack him out of petty anger. Especially after he tried to make peace with you. And right after our teachers gave you a meeting about appropriate hero behavior, for shame, Ida told him off. Bakugou struggled against the taller teen's stronger grip and cursed him out, shouting, F off for eyes. The purple FR had it coming. And I'm not AF Pokémon. Could have fooled me, Gar squeaked out in pain while trying to sit up. Knowing the moral code of Team Rocket, Plasma, and the Ether, I wouldn't be surprised that they made you. I heard you mention something about that yesterday. Who are they? Izuku asked Gar while helping him into a chair. Team Rocket, Team Plasma, and the Ether Foundation. They're groups of evil organizations or teams that have done pretty rotten things to Pokémon in the past. But I managed to put an end to them all, Gar explained. What things did they do to Pokémon that were so bad? Uraraka asked. Gar blew out air like it was a heavy topic, and replied, boy, where do I begin? Team Rocket is a team of thieves who believe that Pokémon are meant to serve their organization, making money off of rare Pokémon and their parts. Even stealing things used to evolve, capture, and heal Pokémon. Even stealing endangered Pokémon themselves from the wild and trainers alike. They even went so far as to clone a Pokémon, Gar told the class. Clone, one person exclaimed in shock. A Pokémon, another questioned. Gar nodded his head and explained, yep, the original was a Pokémon called Mew. Team Rocket found its DNA in the jungles and then hired some twisted scientist to make an even more powerful clone. After many failed experiments, Mewtwo was born. And they made it powerful, too powerful. They tried to restrain it by warping its memories, but that only made things worse. It became savage and cruel, then broke out of its prison and killed its creators. Holy SHT, one person exclaimed. That's terrible, a girl shouted. Gar quickly retaliated by saying, but it's fine now. I dethroned the leader of Team Rocket, twice, and caught Mewtwo, making him much more calm and tame. After everyone had calmed down from the shocking information, Zero asked, so what about this Team Plasma? Gar snapped his fingers and explained, oh them. You know, out of all the teens I met, they were the ones who I thought were simultaneously the most logical and second craziest. Second, someone asked. Far waved off the comment while saying, a story for another time. Anyway, Team Plasma was hell-bent on liberating Pokémon from humankind, seeing humans as harmful to the existence of Pokémon. In a way, they had a point, but went about it in the worst way possible. So they tried to use the power of 3 legendary Pokémon in order to subjugate the whole region in a tyrannical monarchy rule. If that wasn't bad enough, they did something similar to what Team Rocket did to Mewtwo. One person gasped at this and asked anxiously, they cloned a Pokémon too. Gar's sweat dropped as everyone inched closer to his face, and he answered, no, they augmented a Pokémon. Argument. Like giving a new part to the original, someone asked. Gar took a deep breath and replied, let me explain. They revived a fossil of an ancient Pokémon and then augmented it with technology, completely morphing its body, physiology, typing, and basically everything about it. Essentially, they turned it into a different species altogether. They even grafted a cannon to its biology. Sounds like RoboCop. Kaminari commented. But I managed to stop them like I did Team Rocket. Gar followed up. Uraraka visibly quivered and stated, geez. I don't think I even want to know about Ether at this point. Gar glanced over to the side as he said, well, theory even worse. How? Everyone shouted as they got into his face in suspense. They did everything that Team Rocket and Plasma did and more. Gar answered as calmly as he could, warranting Ida to hold everyone back again. After things settled down again, Gar explained further, the Ether Foundation was a huge pseudo-island paradise that acted as a reserve and research center for injured or endangered Pokémon. Though it held many dark secrets behind it, its CEO was completely obsessed with finding these super rare and powerful Pokémon called Ultra Beasts, and its head scientist was successful in creating 3 Pokémon with something called the ARKS system, allowing it to become any type and be most suited to fight against Ultra Beasts. But they were too powerful and had to be restrained. Should they clone or augment the Pokémon? Someone asked carefully. Gar shook his head and replied, worse, they made a Pokémon. Everyone gasped as Gar explained further, from what I read about them, they're a conglomerate of different Pokémon parts put together. They didn't just take an original and upgrade it, they made something completely different, a Frankenstein's monster among Pokémon. A hushed gasp fell over the whole class at hearing this. Oh my god! Could they be any worse? Momo gasped in horror. Gar then put his hands under his chin while sking in a sharp breath of air. Gyro saw this and asked in exasperation, "Please tell me you're joking." Gar gave a quick sigh before explaining, the CEO of the Ether Foundation was actually a wolf in sheep's clothing. Appearing nice, helpful, caring, and sweet, but in reality, she is a cold, warped, cruel person. She even went so far as to abuse her own kids and treat them like toys. She also used the Pokémon she rescued to make the ARKS Pokémon, and the ones she felt were the cutest or prettiest she would lock away in frozen suspended animation. Even having a trophy room for her to admire. "That's sick," someone exclaimed in a nauseous tone. "But you stopped them, right?" Another asked anxiously. Gar nodded and replied, "I did, but the more I learned about why the CEO did what she did, the more I actually started to pity her." What? The whole class shouted at him. "How could you say that? From what you told us, this woman is vile to the core and evil in all manner of ways. So how could you pity her?" Mina shouted at the older teen while grabbing his shoulders. "She lost her mind and her loved one." This statement made everyone go silent as they backed away from him, and Gar continued explaining, Lusamine and her husband Moan discovered the ultra wormholes, ultra beasts, and ultra dimensions. It was their combined efforts that allowed them to make these discoveries. They even managed to get their hands on a very docile ultra beast called Cosmog. But something went wrong. I don't know all the details, but something happened, and an ultra wormhole scared up Moan, who disappeared forever. Lusamine lost her mind due to stress and the longing to make something to combat the ultra beasts if they did invade. Her heart might have been in the right place, but her head was long since lost. And I barely managed to help her daughter scrape up what remained of their relationship to build back together. No one said a word, only silence lingered in the air at his statement. It was hard to hear, but reasonable to accept. Losing your loved one plus extreme longing turning into obsession would lead most people to become completely mad. Wow. That's actually really sad. One person said softly. Yes, but that still doesn't excuse the things she did. Another added in. But enough about that, let's talk about me. Buzzed. A new voice shouted as a floating orange smartphone with a face shot out from behind Gar's back. AH. Talking phone. Kirishima screamed in fear, but his fear vanished as he realized what he had said. He rebutted excitedly, saying, "No, wait. Cool. Talking phone. Gar, who or what is this?" Uraraka pointed to the self-flying phone. "Oh, this is Dash." Gar began to speak until he cut off. "Hello, everyone, my name is Rotom. I am Garfield's assistant and his most handsome, most intelligent, most amazing friend." Buzzed. The phone, Rotom, introduced himself in a self-absorbed, flamboyant manner while spinning around in the air. Rotom appeared to be a phone with its face on the back. It was orange with two small lightning bolts sticking out on the top and bottom. It glowed an outline of blue, with a toothy smile and unusual-looking white eye rings with blue centers. And most obnoxiously egotistical. Gyro said to herself. "Is that a Pokémon?" One person asked. Gar nodded and replied, "Yep, Rotom is a Pokémon. Come on out of my phone for a minute." Suddenly, an orange bolt of lightning shot out of the phone, and the device fell out of the air and into Gar's hand. The phone now looked like a normal black smartphone. The lighting manifested into an unusual light bulb-looking creature with the same coloration, hue, eyes, and smile as the phone. This time, it had two blue lighting bolts with sharp appendages sprouting from either side. It also appeared to buzz and fizz around, almost glitching, like it couldn't sit still. "Whoa!" One person exclaimed. "So cool." Another commented. "So cute." Another added with a coo. "It looks like electricity." Another observed. Izuku moved towards Rotom with huge, excited, sparkly eyes and stated, you're so cool, Rotom. Rotom smiled back while making a bunch of electrical noises. Izuku was taken aback by this and asked Gar, why isn't he talking? He can't talk unless he's on my phone. You see, Rotom is a ghost electric type, which means he can possess electrical devices. Even his typing, moves, and stats change depending on what he possesses, he explained. He doesn't look like a ghost. One person observed. Gar shrugged while looking to the side and replied, well, Pokémon typings can be a bit blurred at times. There's a bird Pokémon that's also a dragon type. And it's just like Y. So, is he part of your team? One person asked. Gar shook his head and replied, nope, Rotom serves a completely different function. Also, I got him as a gift from a close friend. Gar held up his phone and said, come on back in, buddy. Rotom smiled and, in an instant, shot himself back into the phone like a bolt of lightning. Rotom's face appeared back on the phone while also taking back its coloration and sighed with relief, saying, Arth, it's much more comfortable inside your phone. Buzzed. Rotom here is actually a special case in terms of his kind. He doesn't just possess the technology, he upgrades it too, Gar explained excitedly. Like how? Someone asked. Gar tapped his chin while thinking and answered, well, I'm glad you asked. Buzzed, Rotom cut in off, getting in front of his face. I'm a phone with unlimited texting and talking, Wi-Fi and hotspot capabilities, a built-in firewall, internet surfing, DirecTV to video streaming functions, a built-in camera, GPS, hacking, decoding algorithm, facial and fingerprint recognition. I double as a pokes and can check moves, typing stats, and record data on Pokémon. Buzzed. I have everything. Buzzed. He listed off his own achievements in a face-rubbing manner. Gar nodded and added, yeah, Rotom has been a real big help and saving grace in my most recent journey. Kaminari then scooted up to Gar and excitedly asked, hey, can you show that giant dragon fish thing on Rotom, the one that wiped the floor with Bakugou? Gar sighed at his phrasing and corrected him, saying, again, he's called a Gyarados, unsure. Then, Gar turned to Rotom and asked, Rotom, pull up info on Gyarados. Rotom then faced the class with his screen, and an app called Pokes opened. A moment later, a picture of Gyarados showed up as Rotom read its entry aloud, Gyarados, the atrocious Pokémon. Dex #A water and flying type. And the evolved form of Magikarp. When Magikarp evolves into Gyarados, its brain cells undergo a structural transformation. It is said that this transformation is to blame for this Pokémon's wildly violent nature. Buzzed. Everyone crowded around the floating phone as they oohed and ordered the info and Rotom's capabilities. Then someone pointed out something, asking, is your Gyarados sick or something? Gar looked at the person, confused. Shaking his head, he replied, no. Why? Because the one in this picture is blue, not red like yours, the person asked, pointing to the primary coloration on its body. Gyarados are actually a natural blue color. Buzzed. Garfield's Gyarados is a rare variant called a shiny. Buzzed. They're really just Pokémon of another color. Buzzed. Rotom explained. Whoa. That's super wicked, dude. One person exclaimed. So manly. Another agreed. That's good, right? One person asked. How'd you get it? Izuku asked Gar. Gar rubbed the back of his head and replied, he. That's a story for another day. Before anyone could comment more or ask for another story, one of the Pokeballs on Gar's belt began to shake. Gar saw this and, sweating, said in a loud voice, oh. Everyone saw what Gar meant and immediately scurried away from him, thinking that Gyarados would pop out and nearly crush them all in the small classroom with its huge body. The Pokeball opened up, and a flash of blue light poured out and manifested a much smaller shape, small enough to fit on Gar's desk. The matter of the creature took shape and was an unusual creature, no bigger than a plushie. The creature looked far more like a toy than an animal, as its body seemed to be made of old, worn, washed-out cloth. Its head was big and lumpy and swung around like a puppet on a string. It had 2 long bent ears that were colored black at the tips. Its face was painted on with 2 black eyes, 2 red cheeks, and a squiggly smile. All the drawn-on parts were extremely sloppy. It had a tail made of wood shaped like a lightning bolt. Upon closer inspection, it appeared that it wasn't a toy but a creature wearing a disguise, as its actual body just peeked out from under the sheet. It even had 2 very small black dotted eyes right under the false head where the chest would be. "Mimikyu!" cried the odd creature. Gar smiled joyfully at the creature and stated happily, "Oh, Mimikyu. What are you doing out of your ball?" "Who's that Pokémon?" one person asked in a creeped-out tone. "UCK. It's super creepy looking," one person garaged in a disgusted tone. "It is kinda scary," one person stated fearfully. "Why is it wearing a puppet?" one person asked cautiously. "What's wrong with it?" another asked with a mix of fear and disgust in their tone. Gar then made a shocked expression and scooped the small creature into his arms. Jumping out of his seat, he exclaimed, "Haven't you, Scraggy, ever heard of the saying, if you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say anything?" Everyone looked at Gar with a confused expression until Kaminair voiced his 2 cents and said, "What's the big deal, dude? I mean, they're not wrong. It is kind of creepy and ugly looking, it's just an observation." Gar turned to Kaminair with red hate in his eyes. With one hand, he snuggled Mimikyu into his body, and with the other, he punched Kaminair straight in the jaw. Everyone gasped at this as Kaminair hit the floor, only to pop back up and complain in a shout, "OW. Dude. What the heck?" Gar, who still kept his furious expression, held out Mimikyu and shouted back in demand, "I demand that all you Mudbray apologize to precious Mimi at once." Gar's attitude shift immediately took everyone aback. It was something to behold, as he went from a serious yet kind, adorable guy to violent and demanding. Until Gyro piped up with her apathetic tone and stated, "Why? It's not exactly the prettiest thing to look at. We have plenty of animals in our world that aren't nice to look at. What's the difference with one Pokémon that wears a creepy ugly rag?" Gar turned towards Gyro with the same furious expression and punched her square in the jaw. Yet again, everyone gasped at this as Gyro hit the floor, only to pop back up and complain in a shout, "OW." Gar turned away from the class and exclaimed, "Can all of you be any more heartless?" The room then went silent as they heard a very small weeping noise. Everyone looked for the source and saw Mimikyu burying its real face into Gar's shirt as it started to go moist with tears. Gar whipped his head to the class with a hateful glare, causing everyone to freeze or back away. "Now look what you Mudbray did. Mimi is crying." "It's okay, Mimikyu, don't listen to those stupid Nidoqueens, I'll always think you're the greatest." Gar held Mimikyu into its shoulder like a child and rubbed its back, cooing softly to it, "None of you could ever understand how hard it is to be Mimikyu." Silence filled the room from the dramatics until Katsuki, who couldn't care less about all this, piped up and asked, "Okay, I'll bite. Why are you getting so defensive over it?" Gar looked to Rotom, who gave Gar a silent nod. Rotom floated to the class and pulled up a picture of Mimikyu while reading its data. "Mimikyu, the disguise Pokémon. A fairy and ghost type. Dex # it hides its hideous body underneath a rag made to look like Pikachu in order to gain love and affection from others. If the neck on its disguise is broken, it'll stand in front of a mirror all day trying to fix it, but it's extremely difficult, so it'll cry on the inside. If any harm comes to its rag, it'll spend tearless hours of the night trying to fix it." No one said a peep when hearing its information, as there was really nothing to say or that could be said. Until one person popped up in a saddened tone and said, "That's actually really sad." "SHT," one person said while covering their mouth in shock. Gar nodded with an angry huff and exclaimed, "Yeah, well, maybe now you heartless jellicents will learn not to judge by appearance alone." And apologized to Mimikyu, he demanded of the class while holding out Mimikyu towards them. Upon seeing the class staring at him, Mimikyu squeaked in fear and wiggled out of Gar's grasp, jumped onto his arm, ran the length of it, and jumped into his body while burying his true face into his neck like a frightened child. However, this reaction only made Gar glare even harder. No one attempted to make a move or say anything with the combined force of Gar's furious glare and Mimikyu crying like a hysterical child. Surprisingly, Uraraka was the first to approach and say to the little creature, "We're sorry for judging you so harshly, Mimikyu." Mimikyu stopped crying and looked up from Gar's neck with a tear-stained face. "Yeah, it's not your fault you're so ugly that you have to dress yourself in the dark not to scare yourself," Zero added, only to get a sharp jab in the ribs from Momo. "Oh. What he means is, we should have gotten to know why you do what you do before coming up with a conclusion," Momo corrected Zero's explanation. "Can you ever forgive us?" Shoji asked. Uraraka spread out both her hands as if waiting for Mimikyu's decision. Also, she had no idea how to ask for confirmation from it. Mimikyu swayed position from Gar's neck to his shoulder as he looked at the girl's hands. Mimikyu looked up and down at the hands, then arched itself back and kept into the air. Mimikyu then landed on Uraraka's chest and sprouted two thin, black arms with 3 fingers. Then, she wrapped them around her face, where the small animal began to snuggle her. Gar's expression immediately turned back to normal at this sight, and with a small chuckle, he said, "Your lucky Mimikyu is very forgiving. You know, now that I've gotten to know what Mimikyu is all about, he's actually kinda cute," Urarak stated while hugging the small creature. "Yeah. Creepy cute," Mina cried. "Like a dark chocolate truffle," Toru added. Gar giggled at the sight of all the girls and some of the guys surrounding Mimikyu and showering him in affection while saying, "Careful guys, Mimikyu really likes attention and might smother you back if he gets too excited." Mimikyu looked so much more happy as he waved his little arms around and bounced in place. And his fairy typing makes him even cuter. "Ribbit," Tsuyu said with a slight croak. "How is that even a fairy?" "Doesn't even look like a fairy," Soto asked. "I believe it fits Mimikyu perfectly," Tokoyagami answered, causing everyone to look at the bird-headed teen for an explanation. The Fae of ancient stories tell of powerful, mysterious, and twisted creatures that macerated in the guides of appealing otherworldly helpers of the forest. When, in fact, they wore a mask that concealed the darkness underneath each Fae. He said like a gothic poet, making everyone sweat drop awkwardly. Despite his wording, he's not entirely wrong about fairies, Gar added. "What?" the whole class exclaimed. "Well, fairy-type Pokémon are known for being not only pretty and cute-looking but also extremely dangerous or malicious. They're the bane of dragon-type Pokémon," Gar explained further. "Well, I don't care, I think Mikikui could do no wrong." "Can you?" "No, you wouldn't." "No, you wouldn't," Mina picked up the Pokémon and made a baby voice. "Come on, Bakugou-kun. It's your turn to hold Mimikyu," Uraraka said as Mina's eyes glittered while pushing the Pokémon towards the angry Ash Blonde, who sat in the corner and tried to ignore everyone else. "F no. Get it away from me," Bakugou yelled while trying to keep the Pokémon away from him. "Come on, bro. You know you wanna," Kirishima tried to invite him. "Get lost, shitty hair," he shouted at the red-haired teen. "Come on, Bakugou-kun, hold the baby," Mina encouraged him. "What's wrong with you idiots?" he shouted at all of them. "Come on, burp the baby," Tor chirped in with a giggle. All the while, Mimikyu tried to reach its surprisingly long arms towards Bakugou like a child looking to be held while letting out a small cute burp. Mineta looked skeptically at Mimikyu, who stared back and said, "If what Tokoyagami said is true, then what's Mimikyu's big dirty secret behind its mask? It's a little too ugly for others to look at it." "Boo-hoo," he mocked while picking the small Pokémon from Mina's hands while saying, "Why don't we have a look for ourselves?" Just as Mineta was about to look under Mimikyu's rag, Rotom let off a very loud, ear-piercing warning siren that caused Mineta to stop momentarily. Gar came out to the side of him, punched him square in the jaw, and ripped Mimikyu from his grasp. Mineta flew quite easily from the punch, and after hitting the floor, he shot up, expecting to see Gar's furious face and wonder what he did to deserve it, only to see something much different. Gar did not look furious at him, in fact, he looked terrified. He was pale, eyes wide, body shaking, sweating bullets, and breathing heavily. Don't do that. Ever, he pointed his finger at him in a deadly serious tone. What the dash? Why? Why did you just punch me? Mineta retaliated in anger once he broke out of the shock. Suddenly, Rotom came next to Mintia with Mimikyu's info pulled up and said, if anything tries to look under Mimikyu's disguise, it'll lash out violently. It is said that once, a scholar looked under Mimikyu's rag and saw the horror underneath. That very night, he died a slow, painful death. Buzzed. Mineta waved it off aloof and said, oh, come on. You don't really believe that, do you? He asked the last part, a bit worried. Gyro twirled her ear jacks and offered, I don't know, from what we saw Gyarados do alone, who's to say Mimikyu's true form can also kill you from looking at it? With all this drama going on, especially since he was roped into it from time to time, Bakugou was royally sessed off and voiced his aggravation. Why do you shitty extras even care about some stupid animal anyway? Why care about any of them? They're just like our animals, just with quirks. There's nothing special about them or any beach who owns them, he spat. Gar looked at Bakugou smugly and shot back with an even smugger tone, is that jealousy I smell wafting from your words? Bakugou whipped his head towards him with a tack already showing on his head and shouted back, like hell, I'm jealous of you, purple effer. I don't care about your OPSHT eating animals or how you make them your beaches. Gar smiled vexingly at his answer and offered, okay, I see where this is going. I know people like you, after you've tasted unsatisfactory defeat, you want to test your mettle again to see if you can topple or stand on even ground, right? So let's have it your way and battle. Bakugou smiled wickedly and punched a small explosion. He exclaimed excitedly, so you finally wanna have a proper punch-out, eh? Well, that sounds dandy to me. I'll beat you anytime, anywhere with dash. Before he could finish, Gar slapped his hand over his mouth as he butted in, saying, perhaps I should be more specific. I meant that the two of us have a Pokémon battle and dash. Bakugou ripped his hand off and cut in, saying, I'll fight any of your stupid animals dash. Gar covered his mouth with his other hand, getting a bit more annoyed, and clarifying, no, I meant we are going to battle with Pokémon. To the death, Bakugou shouted while ripping off his other hand, with fire in his eyes. Enough, Gar shouted into his face, causing everyone to go silent. Gar calmed down while pushing back his hair and continued saying, okay, look, in my world, most disputes are settled with Pokémon battles. Trainers never get physical with each other. Come to think of it, no one really does. And there is no to the death magic rap. Got it, Bakugou nodded his head, surprisingly, in silence. We'll do a simple 1v1 battle. Well, each has one Pokémon, and whoever defeats the other wins. Sounds good. This time, Bakugou got back his voice and boastfully declared, hell yeah. I'll beat you at your own shitty animal fighting game. Gar smiled and, taking the 6 different Pokeballs from his belt, placed them in front of a desk, along with Mimikyu, who stood behind his own Pokeball. Spreading his hands around the devices, he explained, okay, the 6 Pokeballs before you hold the 6 Pokémon I currently have with me in this world. You are allowed to choose anyone you like, however dash. Before he could continue, even though his opponent listened to his words, Bakugou snagged a Pokeball and declared, I want this one. It looks powerful. The Pokeball Bakugou held was a bit different from the normal Pokeball. It was still round with a black divided line and activation button, but the top half was black with 2 yellow lines. Gar blinked at his quick decision and stated, you don't even know which one that is. I still haven't even told you them and which typing dash. I don't care, let's fight Beach, Bakugou cut him off impatiently. Gar raised a skeptical eyebrow and asked, are you sure you want that one? 'Cause I still have to explain dash. Less talk and more beating to a death, Bakugou barked at him. Gar shrugged with a sigh, and taking his own, he said, okay, then I'm gonna choose this one if that's alright with dash. Gar said this while taking a normal-looking Pokeball. Bakugou was already at his limit with waiting and snapped at the older teen, enough wasting time, and let's get to the part where I WHP you. I'll beat any animal you have with this one, and this one alone. Gar shrugged, and standing up, he said aloud, "Alrighty then." Bakugou was about to throw the ball when Gar quickly grabbed his arm and exclaimed, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you think you're doing?" Bakugou looked at him weirdly and replied, "I'm gonna fight you with a monster, duh." Gar shook his finger like a disapproving mother and stated, "No, no, no, no. We are battling outside. You have no idea how destructive they can be, especially in closed spaces. And they're called Pokémon, not monsters. But we can't go outside. Mr. Aizawa will be back soon, and school has already started. Well, we'll get in huge trouble." Izuku stressed to them, knowing full well what he was referring to. Gar petted Izuku's head like a stressed animal and replied, "Relax, Izuku. We won't get in trouble, we're just, taking an intellectual break. You guys don't have to come, Katsuki and I will duke it out and be back before you know it. And if we are caught, then the blame can be placed on me. You can just say that I instigated it and used my Malamar to control your mind. They can't kick me out, so yeah. Are you coming, Purple Effer, or what?" Bakugou asked in a raised voice, as he was already at the front door, ready to leave with Pokeball in hand. "That's not my name, Katsuki, and yes," Gar answered while following him out the door. Mimikyu jumped on his shoulder, and Rotom followed up behind him while floating. As soon as the two teens left, everyone else followed them out and into a much more spacious area for them to have a proper Pokémon battle. Boy, was this going to be something else. Chapter 3, Katsuki vs. Gar. Later in Gym Beta, after a few minutes of sneaking around the school and doing their best to avoid being seen by other classes or teachers, the entire class of 1A finally made it to the Gym Beta. This is a horrible idea. We should just get back to class before Aizawa-sensei knows we're gone. Can't we just do this after school hours? Ida stressed to the group as they entered the gym. The class ignored the uptight teen as they all meandered around, finding seats at the bleachers. Gar admired the whole gym, walking around aimlessly, head turned upwards, never looking at the same spot for more than a second, like a kid in a candy store. Man, this place is perfect for a Pokémon battle. Especially for our types, he said proudly, admiring the tall ceilings and wide-open floor plan. "You're not even listening to me," Ida shouted at them with his robotic arm movements. "Shut it for eyes," Bakugou yelled at him while taking one side of the gym. "Yeah, what Katsuki said, in the context rather than the form. Just remember, if things go south, then throw me under the bus. Besides, this'll be quick," Gar stated with hidden smugness in his voice while taking the other side. "Yeah, quick for you, Purple Effer," Bakugou shot back boastfully. Gar sweat dripped, and replied in monotone, "I'm gonna drill some respect into that thick head of yours, even if I have to use a Behemoth." Gar then turned to Rotom and motioned to him. He said, "Rotom, here will be our referee and HP counter of the Pokémon." Rotom flew in excitedly, exclaiming, "Buzzed! I'll do my utmost best, Garfield." "Buzzed! Trainers, send out your Pokémon." Bakugou was quicker than Gar and threw his Pokeball onto the field first. The golf ball-sized device flew from his fingertips and promptly fell on the ground, not releasing the Pokémon inside. Bakugou stared at the ball in confusion as he exclaimed, "It didn't come out. Oi, Purple Effer, are you trying to cheat me? There's no murderous magic animal in here." Gar pinched the bridge of his nose and said, "That's because you threw it wrong. You have to push the button in the center, and then you throw it." Bakugou went onto the field to retrieve the ball, pressed the button in the center, and nearly dropped it as it expanded to nearly twice its size. Now, the Pokeball was the size of a large apple. Bakugou looked at the ball and then threw it out onto the field. The ball popped open, and out came a bright blue light that manifested into a very unusual-looking creature. To give the short version, it looked as if you took a Diplodocus, a stealth bomber, fused the two together, and then gave it a creepy ghostly aura that made your skin rise. For the long version, it was very reptilian-looking, and as stated before, looked like a giant Diplodocus. It was much larger than a human, and its body, although short, was colored dark navy blue that fades into a much light cyan blue on its lower body. Its stomach was pale yellow with 3 red triangles pointing up towards its head with red-colored fingers. Its tail is what gave it its length and was the same color as its lower body. At the same time, the very tip seemed to fade out to near transparency. Its head, shaped like a stealth bomber, was triangular in shape, colored dark navy blue that looked black with 4 triangular horns on each side of its head, with the ones closest to its yellow eyes being slightly bigger, red eyelids and pale yellow jaw, the front part of the triangles and tip of its triangular head. Inside the openings closer to its head were 2 mini baby versions of itself. It also seemed to defy gravity as it sat in the air, floating like it had its own sense of gravity. "Who's that Pokémon?" someone asked. Rotom clicked and beeped while pulling up a pic of the Pokémon and read the data aloud. Dragapult, the stealth Pokémon. Dex-Dragon and Ghost type. And the evolved form of Dracloak. When it isn't battling, it keeps Dreepy in the holes on its horns. Once a fight starts, it launches the Dreepy-like supersonic missiles. Buzzed. "So cool," one person exclaimed. "So metal," another shouted. "A dragon." "So lucky," another groaned in jealously. "It shoots its babies." "That's sick," one person commented with a nauseous tone. Rotom heard the last one and added upon it, saying, "Apparently, the Dreepy inside Dragapult's horns eagerly look forward to being launched out at max speeds." Buzzed. "Oh, then it's fine." I guess the same person said in confusion. Meanwhile, Bakugou had a SHT-eating grin on his face, seeing that his gut wasn't just right, but he chose one powerful-looking monster. He did not doubt in his mind that he would win so hard that the purple FO would be crying on the ground in defeat. Gar smiled and said, "My turn, go Togekiss." Gar threw the standard ball from his hands, and out popped a new creature that floated around in the air like Dragapult. It was larger than Gar, large enough for him to ride even, shaped like an egg. In fact, it looked like an egg, with 2 wings that had simple swirls in them, black beady eyes with a kind smile, 3 horns protruding from its head with the one on the correct colored red, the other was colored blue, and the center one was white along with the rest of the body. It had a 3-part tail, with each part getting smaller, stubby legs with 2 toes, and its belly had several blue and red triangle markings. "Now, who's that Pokémon?" the same person asked. Rotom, again, pulled up a pic of the Pokémon and read its entry aloud. Togekiss, the Jubilee Pokémon. Dex-Fairy and Flying type. And the evolved form of Togetic. It is said that Togekiss never appears where there is conflict, so in recent times, it has rarely been seen by humans. It's also been known to spread gifts and blessings to those who veer away from strife, and as such, has been seen as a symbol of peace, prosperity, and good luck since ancient times. Buzzed. "It's so pretty," a girl cooed. "So cute," another girl squealed. "Its entry is so sad," one person observed with a sad tone. Seeing everyone's excitement hit its peak, Gar turned to Rotom and said, "Rotom, start us off." Rotom swayed to battle mode and pulled up 2 side-by-side pics of Gar and Bakugou with 1 Pokeball under their faces, with pics of their Pokémon and their health bars, as he stated like an announcer, with pleasure. Buzzed. Challenger Katsuki Bakugou vs the reigning champ Garfield. The battle will end once either Pokémon on either side has been defeated. Buzzed. Ready. Begin. Gar pointed to Bakugou in a flamboyant pose similar to AMR and offered, "Katsuki, since you are the challenger, I'll allow you to attack first." Bakugou smiled wickedly and shouted back, "That was your first mistake." "All right, Dragon, attack," but instead of going after Togekiss, Dragapult just stood there and looked back at Bakugou with a confused expression. Bakugou saw Dragapult's lack of movement and yelled, "The hell are you doing?" "I said attack." Still Dragapult did nothing, and sweat dropped at him. Even the Dreepy looked confused and scared, even hiding further in its parents' horns. "Do it, you stupid lizard. Kill that flying egg thing," he yelled while stomping the ground with his foot. "You have to give him commands," Gar shouted to him across the area. Bakugou growled in anger and shouted back, "Cest off, I am giving him commands. But the shitty lizard won't do anything. Gar pulled at his hair with one hand and shouted back, you have to tell him to do a move. You say Dragapult use, and then the move name. Bakugou looks at him strangely and asks back, then what the hell does it know? That's what I was trying to never mind. Rotom, if you please, Gar asks Rotom while facepalming in aggravation and exacerbation. Rotom went off battle mode and flew over to Bakugou, where he pulled up Dragapult's current move list. Bakugou stares at the list with an angry, dumbfounded expression as he states, the F is use, dragon dance. Dragapult then starts to shake its body around like it was dancing. While doing so, a red aura pooled around the Pokemon's body. Bakugou looked at this with an unsatisfied expression and yelled, nothing happened. What gives? Actually, something did happen. Buzzed. Dragapult's attack and speed stats rose dramatically, Rotmo answered. Bakugou looked back at Rotom, where it had its stats with its moves, and saw that its attack and speed had indeed risen. Bakugou smiled and exclaimed, keep using Dragon Dance, you F-lizard. Yet again, Dragapult shook its body, and more red aura filled it, causing its stats to rise even higher. Bakugou smiled even wider at this and continued commanding the Pokémon to use the same move over and over again. Gar was getting thoroughly impatient at seeing Bakugou not even attempting to attack like he thought he would. He didn't like it even more that everyone watching had lost their excitement, not having to watch Bakugou tell a dragon to dance a ballet. He pushed his hair back and stated impatiently, any time, Katsuki. Bakugou snapped at him and commanded Dragapult, keep your SHT inside your butt, purple effer. Dragon dance again, this time, when Dragapult danced, no red aura filled its body. Bakugou saw this and shouted, hey, nothing happened. That's because Dragapult attack and speed stats are maxed out. Buzzed, Rotom explained. Sometime this century would be nice, Gar vexed him implicitly. Bakugou clicked his tongue and exclaimed, all right, now use. He looked one last time at the move list before shouting, use flamethrower. Dragapult then opened its mouth and shot out a huge column of flames like a fire-breathing dragon directly at Togekiss. Gar gave a side smile and commanded Togekiss, dodge. Togekiss obeyed, and with quick precision, the egg-shaped Pokémon dodged the attack before it could reach by taking off into the air. Bakugou growled in frustration at this and yelled at Dragapult, you're supposed to hit that thing, damn it. Go after it and burn it to a crisp with flamethrower. Dragapult flew closer to Togekiss while trying to blast a flamethrower closer to its body. But Gar reacted quickly and shouted, Togekiss, keep dodging. In one swift movement, Togekiss dodged the fiery breath with ease, almost as if it were nothing but a fun challenge. Bakugou growled angrily and shouted, why aren't you roasting it? Come on, stupid lizard, you supposed to be a F-dragon. Live up to it. The two Pokémon then took off into their air, with Bakugou commanding Dragapult to keep using flamethrower while Gar kept telling Togekiss to dodge every attack. Which it did with extreme grace. It didn't even look like it was trying to outpace the attack, it was more like it was doing an aerial dance or just playing. Spinning around, making sharp turns, or just looking like it was having a grand time. This game of cat and mouse continued for some time, as Dragapult still failed to hit Togekiss even once, and Gar was getting rather impatient from this circus show. So he cupped his hands and loudly stated, you know. Dragapult has other moves. You should try them instead of being a one-move Ponyta. Bakugou only glared at Gar but then had an idea as he commanded Dragapult, get above that thing and use the flamethrower. Dragapult obeyed and flew right above Togekiss, who did not notice his disappearance at first. Dragapult opened his mouth as hot embers pooled out. The smell and sound of Dragapult's incoming attack alerted Togekiss, and the Pokémon looked up just in time to see the dragon. Gar then quickly shouted to Togekiss, Togekiss, use air slash to get away. Togekiss turned around, belly up, and flapped its wings quickly. Cutting streams of air were produced from its wings just as Drapult breathed fire. The two attacks collide and cancel each other out. However, Togekiss' attack sends the bird egg flying towards the ground and out of reach from the explosion. Togekiss flaps its wings and hovers just inches off the ground after just nosediving at top speed. Bakugou smiles a toothy grin and shouts, "Use Shadow Sneak." Dragapult then dives down to the ground at max speed and disappears into the shadows like a ghost. Togekiss sees this and becomes visibly anxious as it looks around to spot Dragapult. Gar sees Togekiss' distress and calms it down, saying, "It's okay, Togekiss. Just keep vigilant. Dragapult could pop out of anywhere, so be ready to counter." Togekiss chirps and watches the whole field around it like a hawk. Though it doesn't do much for the Pokémon, as Dragapult sulks through the darkness like a shark and then pops out and ramps into Togekiss with a sneak attack of ghostly power. Togekiss cries out and is sent flying across the field. "Togekiss!" Gar yells in distressed worry. Bakugou sees Togekiss cry out in pain and smiles at finally nailing the creature. He takes the opportunity to attack Gar while he is distracted and shouts, "Now use Dragon Darts." Dragapult SCKS in air through its mouth, and suddenly the two Dreppy are launched from its horns like twin missiles. Gar sees this just as Togekiss gets up and says, "Togekiss." Togekiss looks at its MSTR, waiting for the command. Gar sees Gar's assured smile and says, "Stand firm and let the attack hit." Togekiss chirps in reply and levitates into the air while standing perfectly still. The twin Dreppy closes the distance in seconds, and both hit Togekiss directly, causing a small cloud of dust to form. Bakugou smiles proudly, and in an eager feeding tone, he shouts, "Ha! Finally got that stupid egg thing. Ready to throw in the towel, purple effer." Gar gave a small smile as a shadow covered his eyes. This actually made Bakugou backtrack a bit and caused him to lose all his self-assurance and smugness. Gar then looked up, with his now visible again, and said, "Oh please, I haven't even begun to fight. I let you have your fun but now it's my turn." Gar turned his attention back to the small dust cloud starting to settle, also making Bakugou look in that direction. His face immediately dropped upon seeing what he had done. Togekiss was simply floating in the same spot it was before, without even a scratch on its white body. Bakugou looked at Rotom, who was still keeping HP count, and saw that Togekiss had not taken any damage from the previous attack. "Nothing happened," Baku mouthed out quietly. Gar then pointed his arm at Dragapult and commanded, "Togekiss, get in close and use Thunder Wave." Togekiss chirped in reply and flew towards Dragapult with blinding speed. Dragapult freaked out as Togekiss approached and tried to slap the bird away with its tail. Togekiss dodged it with a spin, getting it closer and then emitting a wave of electricity at the dragon Pokémon. Dragapult cried out in distress and fell to the ground as electricity surged through its body. Bakugou started entrance by shock for a moment as the dragon crumpled to the ground without taking any damage. He shook himself out of his mist and shouted, "What the CRP? Oi dragon, get up! You're supposed to be invincible, so get off the ground." Dragapult tried to raise itself on its stubby limbs but only fell on the ground as electricity arched around it. Buzzed. Dragapult has been paralyzed and is unable to move. Buzzed. Rotom announced that a yellow symbol went over Dragapult's HP bar. Paralyzed. "What does that mean?" Uraraka asked. "I think it means what Rotom said, Dragapult's movement is limited," Todorkoi answered. Seeing his chance, Gar smiled and commanded his Pokémon, "Send Dragapult into the air with Air Slash." Togekiss then flew under Dragapult's body and flapped its wings hard, creating the same blade that cut air currents as before. Only this time, they sent Dragapult soaring into the air. Togekiss wasn't too far behind as it closed the distance between the airborne dragon and appeared right above it. "Now, Togekiss, finish it off with dazzling gleam," Gar shouted with excitement. Togekiss then pushed its chest out forward, and its red and blue triangle markings began to glow a bright pink. The sparkling became so intense that the sparkles shot from its marks and pelted the dragon in literal sparkles. Dragapult cried out from the bombardment and fell from the sky, due to the attack pushing him down, and fell to the earth with swirls in its eyes. The HP counter on Rotom immediately dropped down to 0. Dragapult is unable to battle. "The champion Garfield is the victor," Rotom announced. He won, one person said in a neutral tone. He won, several others cheered. Bakugou lost, another said in a neutral observation. Lost bad. LOL, another made fun of the ash blonde. Gar ran up to Togekiss and hugged the giant egg bird. He shouted gleefully, "All right, Togekiss." Togekiss chirped with joyfulness and nuzzled into the older teen, absorbing the cuddles and affection. Gar then pulled away from Togekiss and took out its Pokeball. He said, "Good job. Now heal up with Roost and return." Togekiss chirped in compliance, landed on the ground, and a ring of feathers spun around it, cleaning up its wounds. Once it was healed up, a beam of light shot out from the Pokeball, and Togekiss' matter was converted and stored into energy. Meanwhile, at the other end of the field, Bakugou was on his hands and knees, looking at the ground with an expression that was crossed between shock, panic, disbelief, and fear. He looked only moments from having a breakdown as he stuttered to himself in a low tone. "IIWW what? BB but I dash," he dribbled on as Gar walked up to him. "And I'll be taking that back, thank you very much," Gar said to Bakugou, taking the Ultra Ball from his hands and pointing it at the fainted Pokémon. He said, "All right, Dragapult, return." Dragapult then returned to the ball and disappeared from sight. Just as Gar shrunk the Pokeball, Bakugou was coming out of his funk and asked, "How? It's a dragon. It's supposed to be invincible, right?" Gar looked at him strangely and answered, "Dragon types, invincible. PSH, don't make me laugh. Not even Arceus is invincible, and I caught it. I think," he said the last part softly. "No, what you failed to realize are type advantages," he explained. Bakugou looked at him like a lost child and asked, "Type, what?" Basically, every Pokémon has a specific type, and each type is strong or weak to something. Here is a little tidbit of info I was trying to explain to you before. Until you said you were totally fine with the Pokémon you chose and said, I quote, "I don't care, let's fight." Beat you also said you'd beat any of my Pokémon with your one end quote, he explained. Then how did Togekiss win? Aren't dragons supposed to be super strong? Izuku asked while walking up to the two teens. They are, but with every great strength comes an equal great weakness. For instance, dragon types are normally weak to other dragons, such as ice and fairy. A type that Togekiss just so happens to be, Gar explained with a smug smile. Hearing this made Bakugou lose his current meek attitude and regain his constantly angry one. He started off in a low tone, You cheated. You played me, you bstrd, he shouted the last part while jumping up and pointing a convicting finger. Gar pushed his finger away with an annoyed expression and shot back, I didn't cheat. You just rushed into this battle like some beginner noob trainer fighting a Geodude with a Charmander. I tried to tell you about all my Pokémon, what they are, their types, and even their moves. I would have even told you about type matchups and let you choose a Pokémon for me. So when you didn't, naturally I did the smart thing and used the type advantage. Bakugou's face immediately dropped upon hearing this. He knew he was brilliant, but he really messed up with this. He thought it would be easy, just two animals fighting, and the one hitting harder would win. But he forgot that in order to hit hard, you have to think hard. I was smart, and you were dumb. Battles are just like fighting, you take the best course of action in order to prevail, even by a slim margin. He finished up while walking away. Bakugou clicked his tongue and mumbled under his breath, You just got lucky purple effer. Gar snapped his head so fast back to Bakugou that an audible crack could be heard from his neck. He glared daggers at the ash blonde and stormed in front of him, exclaiming in a yell, Lucky! Lucky! It was not luck that let me beat you. This actually took Bakugou aback. He had never seen someone willing to get into his face and yell back. Normally, anyone would flee or stay passively silent. Gar continued with his rant, exclaiming, I've traveled around every continent and faced off against every gym leader, collected every badge, challenged every Elite Four member, and faced off against every champion of every region and won. And I've become champion of every region, caught all Pokémon including legendaries and mythical, and completed every pokes. I've EV, for trained, and Shiny breed tons of Pokémon. I've mastered every kind of Pokémon food paraphernalia and even completed the 151 recipes in the Codex. I even still take top spots in all Pokémon Coordinator events across several regions. At the mere age of 10, I dismantled an evil team, faced off against the Elite Four, and defeated the champion on my first try. I don't have luck. I have skill, he exclaimed the last part while inching closer to Bakugou's face. Just before any of them could proceed with another action, a very similar, dead-sounding voice asked, "What is going on here?" Aizawa-sensei, one person shouted in surprise. Care to explain what you're all doing here instead of in class, where you should be? Aizawa asked rhetorically. We were just One person tried to speak but only came out with a gargle. Kaminair, who was already sweating bullets and panicking, blubbered out, Garfield's Bahamian manners drilled into a Malamar mind raped. Silence filled the whole gym as everyone just stared at the electric teen with weird expressions or sweat dropped at his explanation. Even Mimikyu, who was sitting on Gar's shoulder, his little painted face looked confused and done. Really? Aizawa asked blandly. Gar then took a breath and walked up to Aizawa. He explained, "It's my fault, Iri's ahead. I convinced everyone to skip class to watch a Pokémon battle between me and Katsuki. He was still sore from yesterday, so I instigated this battle. We just finished. So if you want to punish anyone, punish me." Gar then gave the teacher the biggest, saddest, most soulful yamper eyes he ever made. Aizawa sighed and said back, "Since you are new, and with the added point of your predicament, I'll let it slide, but only this once." Gar smiled at his response, which almost faded at Aizawa's follow-up. "However, you all will be subjected to the same exact kind of punishment for leaving class." "Understood." "Yes, sir," the whole class said in unison. Aizawa then rubbed the back of his head in exasperation. Looking around, he stated, "Now since we're already in Gym Beta, go and change into your gym uniforms and be back out here to do 50 laps. And we'll keep doing laps until you all truly learn your lesson about skipping and responsibility." "Yes, sir," the class replied in unison. "Also, what is that?" Aizawa motioned to Rotom floating next to Gar's head. "Oh, that's Rotom." Gar answered. "Hello." Buzzed. Rotom greeted the tire man. Aizawa was silent for a few moments as he looked over the floating machine, whether to make sure what he was seeing was real or to figure something out with it. The latter was confirmed, as Aizawa asked, "Can he keep count of things?" I think so." Gar replied while shrugging, and Rotom nodded. "Or whatever you call it." "Good. Then he'll be the one to keep track of every lap you all take." Aizawa immediately followed up with an unsettling smile. Rotom made a bunch of displeased electronic noises and replied loudly, "Arceus, damn it." Buzzed. Chapter 4, Typings, Ball, and Food. Later at the lunch hall. After everyone had gone through hell and high water, having to do 50 more laps on top of their previous ones, Aizawa then kept them in Gym Beta to do even more exercises until lunchtime rolled around. All the students, even the more athletic ones, were extremely exhausted and aching all over from the nearly non-stop work and moving around. Even Gar commented on how he hadn't had a workout like that since he scaled Mount Silver at age. Gar even took Mimikyu with him to lunch, with the small creature being held in his arms. Although he wasn't supposed to have his Pokémon in the open, especially around other school students, Mimikyu did have the advantage of looking like just a toy so long as he was held and acted accordingly. Once they all got their food and finally sat at their tables, they nearly melted right into them from sheer exhaustion. Some fell right to sleep, some fell face first into their food or the table, and some actually went completely stiff in their seats. In contrast, others were just too hungry to even care about being tired. One of them was Gar, who was now ravenously chowing down on his meat curry, pie, soup, and sandwich like a starving animal. He made horrible sounds when inhaling his food and had a whole list of other bad table manners. Everyone sitting around him looked on in disgust as he mindlessly continued to eat. Having had enough of it, Ida spoke up and stated, "Garkuan, can you please? Your table manners are absolutely horrendous. It's making us lose ours." What dash? Gar looked up to Ida with a full mouth and glazed expression. This only made Ida nearly vomit at him, which Gar noticed, and swallowed the food remaining in his mouth. He wiped his face with his sleeve and asked, "Sorry, what did you say, Tenya?" "Your table manners." "My goodness, Garkuan, did your mother teach you nothing?" Ida asked in a nauseous tone. Gar's face went from exhaustion to anger in 0.01 seconds as he threateningly pointed his fork at Ida and stated firmly, "Don't ever bring my mother into anything." "I am sorry, okay. But that's no excuse for your table dedicate." Ida put his hands up defensively. "He's right, Ida-kun. You didn't have to bring his mom into this," Uraraka stated plainly while mindlessly failing to pick up her food. "My point still stands." Ida defended himself. "Well, you could have just said that," Gar said while pulling his fork away and taking back his calmer expression. "And besides, I've been on my own for a long time now. There's no time to think about table manners when you travel by yourself, sleep in the wilds, and train Pokémon," he explained while taking another bite of his food. "I guess I can understand that, but while you're here in this precious school, you will be taught proper table dedication," Ida stated firmly. "Yes, Mom," Gar sassed him. "Sorry, Mom, we'll do better," Uraraka added in mindlessly. "Well, make you proud, Mom," Izuku also added, half awake. "Please stop calling me Mom," Ida said in a small and embarrassed voice. "Yes, Mom," they all replied in unison, which only caused Ida to blush and hide his face. A little while later, Mina eventually joined the table, sitting next to Gar, who hadn't noticed her yet. She waited for a moment to see if he would acknowledge her or any of them, but Gar only continued to numbly far away. "Hey, Gar-san," Mina called for his attention. Gar came back to reality, and turning to her with a half-full mouth, he said, "Huh." Seeing his derpy expression and puffy cheeks made Mina giggle a bit, so she quickly took a moment to take a picture of him. After pocketing her phone, she asked, "So back at Gym Beat, when you and Bakugou battled, you said something about typing. What is that exactly?" The light returned to Gar's eyes. Hearing this and shaking himself awake, he swallowed his food and explained to her, "Well, typings are a system of simplifying which Pokémon belongs in which group. Like your world animal system, kingdom, phylum, genus, and species. Stuff like that. We have a more advanced system for Pokémon in egg groups, body shapes, height and weight, and so on. But typing is just the really simple version. A Pokémon is usually given a typing group when taking into account lots of factors." At this point, Mina looked totally lost. Gar saw this and sighed while saying, "Maybe I should just simplify it. If a Pokémon lives in the water and has features related to living in water, then it's a water type. If it lives in the cold, then it's an ice type. Fiery parts or a hot environment. Fire type. Spews toxic material and makes others sick. Poison. However, finding certain types for some Pokémon is harder for others, and they either have to observe them in the wild or battle them with certain moves to see what works the most and least effective, then determine their." Mina mulled over this for a bit, coyly asking, "Suiyu, since we are basically your world's equivalent of Pokémon, what would my type be?" "Your type?" Gar questioned. "Well, from what you told me about your quirk, I guess I'd say you would be a poison type." This made Mina squeal with delight. "What about me? What type would I be?" Kaminair asked excitedly while sitting down with them. "That's easy, pure electric." Gar pointed. Kaminair then did a first pump into the air and cheered. "How about me?" Kirishima asked while coming to the table. "Rock or rock fighting?" Gar answered. Kirishima smiled with bright teeth. "What about Dash?" Another person began to ask until Gar cut them off. "Okay, you know what? How about I go down the list and name it off in rapid fire, okay?" Gar asked as everyone else, who was starting to move over upon hearing the conversation, nodded with him. Uraraka and Izuku snapped out of their tired trance to pay attention. Even the aloof Tokroki and distant Tokoigami joined out of curiosity. Gar sighed, rubbing his chin, and looked around at where he should start. Who was the easiest to identify and then move from there? He already did it with Mina, Kirishima, and Kaminair, so who's next? He just thought to do everyone at the table he was sitting at and go from there. So he turned and looked around and, pointing at people, he said, pure water. Fairy psychic combo. Normal or normal fighting. Pure fighting. Pure fighting or fighting normal. Electric fighting combo. Fairy or normal fairy. Pure normal. Pure normal again, though you could squeal by with steel. Pure normal or pure ghost or ghost fairy combo. Dark flying. Fire ice combo, he said while pointing to Tsuyu, Uraraka, Soto, Shoji, Ojiro, Izuku, Aomar, Koda, Gyro, Toru, Tokoigame, and Todoroki in that order. He then stopped when he came to Ida and thought for a moment. After some silence, he finally said, I'm really not sure what to put you as, Tenya. I would say normal, but you've got metallic parts, so you may be steel. And you also move real fast, so maybe flying. How do I count as a bird? Ida asked, confused. Oh, trust me, the flying type is very lenient. There are these two Pokémon called Doju and Dodrio who are wingless bird Pokémon who are flying types and can learn the move fly. I'm not sure how though, and I've never seen one use fly in a battle before. Suuuu, yeah. One or the other. Gar explained. Ida obviously didn't like his answer but accepted it nonetheless. He then turned his attention to Zero and Mineta and really scratched his head. I don't know. Normal or bug type, I guess. He shrugged. Bug. They both shouted. Why bug? Is it because I'm short? It's because I'm short, isn't it? Mintia cried angsty. Gar put his hands up in defense and stated quickly, well, there's nothing that says elemental about you two, and the closest thing that your quirks come close to in the natural world are bug types. The two of them sunk to the floor and muttered to themselves while softly sobbing about being compared to an insect. Gar's sweat dropped at this, and he turned to the final person, Momo. He looked at her, and after about a minute of uncomfortable staring, he finally said, I have no idea. What? Some of them asked aloud. Just like that. One person asked. That's it. Another added. Yep. Gar replied. So does she not fall into any category? Izuku asked. Gar shook his head and replied, no, she falls into every category. What? How? Momo asks, surprised. Your quirk allows you to create anything, so you technically could create anything with different elemental or natural properties or uses, Gar explained as Momo looked on, trying to figure this out herself. All in all, if I had to put you into one category, it would be normal type. Normal type, that's it, one person asked incredulously. That's it, Gar replied while feeding Mimikyu his food. That's disgraceful, dude. Momo has way more skill than to be considered normal, Kaminair puffed out his chest in defense of her. And everyone else I mentioned as normal should belong there due to their skill, he sassed him back. This caused Kaminair to lose his confidence. He glanced at everyone else placed in the normal type, who glared back at him with daggers in their eyes. It's that or nothing, besides that, she reminds me of two different Pokémon with their properties, Ditto and Arceus, Gar followed up. What's that? Some asked. Ditto is a Pokémon that can transform its body into just about anything, Gar explained. Hey, just like Momo. Kinda. Uraraka said while looking at the girl, who agreed with the connection. And the other basically is the creator of my dimension and created everyone and everything in it, Gar said like it was nothing. Everyone stared at the young man with huge eyes and dropped jaws. No one moved, ate, or even replied, apart from Gar, who continued to share his food with Mimikyu. They didn't just hear what they thought they did, right? Someone finally asked, wait, so this Pokemon Arceus is basically your dimension's version of God? Yes, he replied. Another person asked, and since you said you caught every Pokemon, that means you caught God. I guess I did, he shrugged. So you just compared Momo to God? The same person asked again. Yes, he said simply. No one said a word until someone suddenly shouted, Momo is a god, everyone. Momo is a god. Momo squealed out in surprise and blushed at the connection. Which causes someone else to shout out, all hail our Lord and Savior, Momo. All hail, the whole class cheered. You guys. Please stop. Momo begged them as she hid her lobster-red face in her hands. As everyone cheered and Momo slowly died from happiness and embarrassment, Kirishima suddenly said, oh, wait. We forgot about Bakugou. What type would he be? Since Bakugou wasn't at the lunch table or in the lunch room with any of them, the ash blonde was totally MIA. Gar snapped his finger and shot back quickly, that's easy. Dark fire combo. This made everyone laugh out loud until someone else asked, let me guess, Aizawa Sensei would be pure dark, right? Gar shook his head, which made everyone stop, until he replied, don't be silly. He'd be a fairy type. This caused another round of laughter from the class, as they all joked around with each other about their typing or combos, which carried on until the end of lunch. In the hall after lunch ended, the teens walked down the hall in a huge group, talking amongst themselves as they made their way back to their home class for their next heroics lesson. They still weren't in the classroom when Ida, who saw Gar's visible pokeballs hanging around his belt, asked, Garkuan, why do you have your pokeballs out in the open? Aren't you afraid that if someone knew about them, they'd steal them and then use your Pokemon against you? Gar shook his head and replied, even if someone did manage to snag one of my ball, they wouldn't open. Ida looked at him confused and followed up with, but we just say Bakugou-san used them but a few hours ago. That's because I allowed him to use them, he explained like it was simple. I think I can speak for all of us when I say we need more context to that statement, Momo stated, with everyone agreeing. Gar's sweat dropped, and he explained, sorry guys, I guess I forgot you don't know how things work in my world. You see, we have these things called trainer IDs. Every trainer or someone with a Pokemon has one. It's basically something that's wired into the Pokeballs we own in order to use them. It's like a touch-activated thing, I don't know all the details. So someone without a trainer ID or a different ID wouldn't be able to use someone else's Pokeballs. They just stay in rest mode. Everyone seemed to understand and nodded to show it. And even if they did manage to hack or overwrite my ID, my Pokemon would never attack me. I've built unbreakable bonds with all my Pokemon, so I'd have nothing to worry about. Even if they did want to obtain my Pokemon and control them, they'd either have to mind control them, have me trade them, or steal them with a thief ball. He explained further. What's a thief ball? Someone pipes up. Gar put his arms behind his head in a resting position and explained, a specialized Pokeball that is, as the name implies, designed to steal other people's caught Pokemon. Rewriting the person's ID with their own, hearing this new bit of info made everyone gasp. They didn't think it was possible, but if you could lock it up, someone could eventually break it open. But they're highly illegal. So anyone caught buying or manufacturing anything would be granted the worst punishment possible. So many criminals or regular idiots are just too scared to make them. Gar followed up, seeing everyone's shocked expression, which calmed them down. Just as everyone was coming off that shock, Toru piped up and chirped out, so off-topic question, what other Pokemon do you have? You said you could only have about 6, and we've seen 4, so who are the other? Gar looks to where he assumed the invisible girl's face was and replies, sorry, Toru, but that's a surprise. He boops the tip of her nose, though only getting her head. Ah. I hate suspense, Toru complained while waving her arms up and down. Speaking of Pokemon, what do you eat in your world? Zero asked out of the blue. Gar looked at him with the most off-put expression as he asked back, excuse you. You really like meat, right? He followed up. Gar nodded and replied, yeah, it's my favorite thing. My mom was always strapped for cash, so we ate meat on very rare occasions. So when I sought out on my own and gained enough coins, I would eat meat all the time. Why are you asking? So then, you eat Pokémon? Zero asked carefully. Gar stifled a laugh and stated, well, duh. Where do you think meat comes from? A tree. Everyone stared at the older teen with expressions ranging from shock to disgust until Kaminair said it best, that's kind of wrong, dude. I mean, you train, battle, and love these things like pets. And on top of that, you eat them. Don't you technically do the same with your world's animals? He asked back, to which everyone gained understanding expressions on their faces mixed with disbelief. Certain Pokémon have certain purposes, some are used in battle, some are more accustomed to domestic life, and some are better for eating. That's just how things are. And besides that, there are like 1,000 different Pokémon. Don't you think at some point someone would try a few of those meats? Everyone still looked incredulously at these facts, but nodded their heads nonetheless. Even Pokémon eat each other. For instance, Corsola is the favorite food of Toxapex, Walrein is the natural prey of Sharpedo, and Swellow loves to gobble up Wurmple. That's called nature. Gar gave some examples for the class to understand, which they did, albeit in small increments. My favorite is Slowpoke Tail. You'll never taste anything better. Gar recalled with happy sparkles in his eyes. What about the rest of it? Someone asked. Gar shook his head and answered, nope, just the tail. The rest of the Pokémon is just disgusting. UCK. It's like a garbage disposal, it'll eat anything, and its body doesn't process it properly. So you kill a whole animal for a single part, one person asked with a horrified expression. Gar waved off the accusations and explained, don't be ridiculous. That would be wasteful. You just cut off the tail. That's totally inhumane, someone shouted in horror. Again, Gar waved off the accusation and explained, no, it's totally fine. Slowpoke naturally loses their tails all the time, sometimes, they just fall off for no reason. They grow back after a couple of days or so. And the Slowpoke almost never realizes that they're in pain. I actually keep a few Slowpoke around just for the purpose of eating. Hearing this, everyone's faces of horror returned to normal as they understood more of Gar's world and the rules governing the use of Pokémon. Just like theirs, so if there was a problem, it would be taken care of properly while having science and rules dictate it. Gar then liked his lips as he added, my favorite dish is sweet and bitter smoked Slowpoke tail curry. MMMMMMMMM. My mouth is watering just thinking about it. Drool dribbled down his lips. Izuku laughed at his funny face and mannerisms, then added, it must be that good since we just finished lunch. As they talked and walked, they were just at the entrance of one as a door when suddenly someone asked something that halted them all in place. So then you could technically eat Mimikyu? A voice asked Gar. Everyone stopped in their tracks and slowly looked down at Mintia's curious face. Who looked dead serious about his question. Normally, someone would berate him for such a question, but the context and the seriousness in his eyes prevented any of them from speaking. Even the quick and well-spoken Gar was dumbfounded, opening and closing his mouth like a fish. Unable to process any form of words or advance sound. Well, I guess. Gar finally escaped as he glanced over to Mimikyu, who was trying to hide himself in Izuku's hair. But I don't think anything would even dare such a feat because of, well, you know. He followed up, though this made Mimikyu only sad instead of scared. Izuku saved the teens but by saying quickly, also, he's too cute to eat, while holding Mimikyu in a cuddling hug, which the small Pokémon returned. Gar gave Izuku a thank you smile as Izuku gave him a thumbs up. Gar then turned back to Miniat and explained further, and besides that, I don't think you can eat a Ghost-type Pokémon unless you're Ghost-type yourself. Just then, a very familiar and monotone voice called the teen's attention, saying, hey. The teen turned their heads to the voice and saw their teacher standing near the doorway, blocked by the crowd of teens. No one said anything or moved until Aizawa finally got fed up and firmly stated, enough chit-chat, and get back to class, or unless you all wanna do more exercises until the end of school. Yes, sir, they all obeyed out of fear in unison before rushing back into the classroom and taking their seats to finish the day. Yep. Aizawa would definitely be a fairy type.